Before the outbreak of the Second World War, Cologne was the fourth largest city in Germany and the largest city on the River Rhine, with a population of approximately 800,000 people. The city of Cologne was bombed by the Royal Air Force in 262 separate air raids during World War II, this in response to the bombing of London at the start of the war. Cologne was an important military target, being a heavily industrialized city with many factories producing war supplies, and the city also had a large railway network, used for the transportation of troops and weapons. A total of 34,711 long tons of bombs were dropped on the city. The last air raid was carried out on March 2, 1945. By the beginning of March 1945, most of the city was destroyed, with roughly 20,000 people remaining in the city. During the night of March 3, Allied aircraft dropped propaganda leaflets over the city, telling its citizens to disobey the directives of the Nazi leadership, asking the inhabitants not to evacuate the city since they had nothing to fear from the advancing troops. The Allied columns approached Cologne from three directions: the 3rd Armored Division striking from the northwest, 104th Infantry Division coming from the west, and 9th Armored Division clearing sections south of the city in conjunction with the 9th Infantry Division. On March 5, the 3rd Armored Division launched a final advance on Cologne. On March 6, the American columns moved out of their positions toward the heart of the city. The Battle of Cologne was important from another point of view as well. It provided exciting conditions for a combat photographer. Troops of the 3rd Armored Division and 104th Infantry were fighting street by street in the bombed ruins of the old city. Visibility was good and the terrain aesthetically interesting. Rising over the city were the undamaged spires of Cologne Cathedral, that formed an exotic, almost romantic backdrop to the fighting. Every cameraman wanted to be the first to capture images of American troops occupying the cathedral. One street over, Sergeant Robert Early and his tank crew heard an explosion and saw smoke drifting over the rooftops. A radioed order came in: there was a Panther tank guarding the cathedral plaza. It had already taken out a Sherman. Early and his crew were to advance and destroy it. It was, after all, what Early's tank had been built to do, for he commanded a T-26E3 Pershing, the Army's experimental answer to German heavy armor. The Pershing was controversial, the subject of a 3-year bureaucratic feud over whether the U.S. Army needed a heavy tank, or could make do with Shermans and tank destroyers. But by 1944, it was clear German tanks outclassed the fast but lightly armored Sherman. The experimental Pershing, by contrast, boasted a lower profile, 105 mm of frontal armor, and a massive 90 mm gun. Frustrated, Eisenhower authorized Zebra mission, an unusual combat test that sent 20 Pershings to Europe, dividing them between veteran crews in the 3rd and 9th Armored Divisions. Early and his crew had been among those chosen and retrained. Now, they were about to take that new, unfamiliar tank and try to flank a Panther as it lay in ambush. Well, Early wasn't going in blind, that was for sure. He dismounted to scout ahead, only to find a guy with a camera beside him. He loaded down with film reels and lenses, and he wanted to come along. Minutes later, the two crouched in the mezzanine of the German Labor Front building, studying the Panther. It had moved up into the corner of the Cathedral Plaza, covering a junction where it could control approaches from 3 streets. Being stationary, it would have the tactical advantage, but at least its gun was trained elsewhere. Early told Bates, the cameraman, to set up his gear. He'd edge the Pershing into the intersection, flanking the Panther to the left. Once there he'd stop, fire into the German side, then back out. With luck, they'd get it all on film. Bates readied his equipment. Inside the turret of number 26, nestled with his left shoulder against the gun breech, Gunner Clarence Smoyer heard Early climb into the commander's station behind him. Early explained the plan, and the driver threw the Pershing into gear. Smoyer counted down the distance until the intersection, when he'd have space to rotate the long gun. As the Pershing's bow edged into the clearing, the driver started shouting. Instead of stopping, he gunned the engine, lurching them out into the open. Smoyer rotated the turret and saw why. The Panther's turret was pointed right at them. The black eye of the gun tube loomed large in his magnified sight. They were zeroed. Their driver was trying to make the Pershing a moving target. Smoyer would need to shoot on the run. If he even got a chance. One street away, the German tank commander First Lieutenant Wilhelm Bartelborth yelled for his gunner to hold his fire. He'd expected the tall profile of a Sherman. But this tank had the dimensions and low silhouette of a Panther. He hesitated for a crucial half-second. Was it German? In answer, a shell crashed through his engine compartment. The Pershing halted, gun smoking. Inside the turret, the loader threw another T-33 armor-piercing shell into the breach. Smoyer hit the firing switch again. 2 floors up, concussion from the second shot rocked Bates' camera. From his viewpoint above the dust and smoke, he recorded each impact. The first shot struck under the gun shield, the second entered the Panther's side. There was an engine fire now. Smoke poured from hatches as the German crew made a stumbling, leaping evacuation. Concussion shook Bates' camera again. This time it was a T-30 round. Its tungsten carbide core touched off the Panther's ammunition, throwing sparks up through the open driver's hatch. A column of fire flared skyward through the commander's cupola. The Panther would burn until the next morning. As it burned, Bates panned up and away from the tank, settling the camera on the Gothic cathedral spires, as if to remind the audience of what has been won. It's a strangely artistic finish to combat footage. But perhaps Bates knew what he was doing, because that film is why we still remember the duel. After all, this was not the only tank contest of the war, or even the largest involving a Pershing. A week before, a single Pershing had destroyed 4 German tanks in Elsdorf. But no one had caught that on film. We remember the duel at Cologne Cathedral not just because of the bravery and technical skill involved, or even the striking background, but because it's the duel we can watch. It was the perfect collision of combat and cinema. At least, the US Army seemed to think so. Because despite the Pershing crew's valor, only one man received a Bronze Star for his actions during the duel at Cologne, the man who filmed it. As the Americans moved towards the Rhine, the German forces demolished the Hohenzollern Bridge, the last link between the east and west of the city. Although the Allies had failed to capture a bridge over the Rhine near Cologne, further south the 9th Armored Division of the U.S. First Army had advanced unexpectedly quickly towards the Rhine. They were very surprised to see that the Ludendorff Bridge, one of the last bridges across the Rhine, was still standing. They captured and defended this crucial asset during the Battle of Remagen. By March 7, all of Cologne west of the Rhine was captured by the Allies. The boroughs on the right bank remained under German control until mid-April 1945. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and to make sure you don't miss my future work, please make sure you are subscribed to my channel and press the bell notification button. Thank you, and see you in the next video.